Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Krishna Krishna Hare
Haribol. Hare Krishna. Is it Boga or Prasadam? Boga would be better. No worries. Hare Krishna. Gargi ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Iskon Guru Vrinda ki jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. South London, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Something about Ekadashi, it's hard to stop Kirtan. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Salokaya Chakshuran Militam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhudevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mahat Prema, Pura Vibhur, Yamakshati Adamusa Purushabam, Tegana, Sadasa Sadasatmaka, Yam Krishi, Stapam Gavan, Macham Seme. Hare Krishna. So that's the best way to spend the Kadashi. In devotee association, and we will continue reading 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the perfection of renunciation, text 54. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 You want to repeat? Brahma Bhutta Prasanatma.
Brahma Bhutta Prasanatma.
Brahma Bhutta Prasanatma.
Brahma Bhutta Prasanatma.
Nashachati na kankshati.
Nashachati na kankshati.
Nashachati na kankshati.
Nashachati na kankshati.
Sama sarveshu bhuteshu.
Sama sarveshu bhuteshu.
Sama sarveshu bhuteshu.
Sama sarveshu bhuteshu.
Mad bhaktim labhate param.
Mad bhaktim labhate param.
Mad bhaktim labhate param.
Mad bhaktim labhate param.
Brahma Bhutta Prasanatma.
Brahma Bhutta Prasanatma.
Nashachati na kankshati.
Nashachati na kankshati.
Sama sarveshu bhuteshu.
Sama sarveshu bhuteshu.
Mad bhaktim labhate param.
Mad bhaktim labhate param.
Translation prepared by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. 54. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Purport. To the impersonalist, achieving the Brahman Bhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in a state of liberation called Brahma Bhuta, oneness with the Absolute Truth. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto Him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor. Yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. In the material concept of life, when one works for sense gratification, there is misery. But in the absolute world, when one is engaged in pure devotional service, there is no misery. The devotee in Krishna consciousness has nothing for which to lament or desire. Since God is full, a living entity who is engaged in God's service in Krishna consciousness becomes also full in himself. He's just like a river cleansed of all dirty water. Because a pure devotee has no naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or aspire for gain, because he is full in the service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment, because he knows that every living entity is a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see in the material world someone as higher and someone as lower. Higher and lower positions are ephemeral, and the devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearances or disappearances. For him, stone and gold are of equal value. This is the Brahma Bhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. In that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with the Supreme Brahman and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish. The idea of attaining the heavenly kingdom becomes phantasmagoria, and the senses are like serpent's teeth that are broken. And there is no fear of a serpent with broken teeth, as there is no fear of a serpent with broken teeth. Miserable for the materially infected person, but for a devotee the entire world is as good as Vaikuntha, or the spiritual sky. The highest personality in this material universe is no more significant than an ant for a devotee. Such a stage can be achieved by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who preached pure devotional service in this age. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nashachitina Kankshati Samasarveshu Bhutishu Mad Bhaktim Lavate Param. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state he attains pure devotional service unto me. So this is Vaishnava liberation. Brahma Bhuta. Becoming one with the Supreme, but not in impersonal sense, losing one's individuality, but in the sense of purpose. There is one very deep painting by an artist, Sharma. What's his first name? Whatever his first name, nobody knows. But his paintings are very expressive and impressive. And there is one where Krishna and Arjuna are sitting on the chariot, and Arjuna is holding bow and arrow in his hands, and Krishna is pointing somewhere with his index finger, and Arjuna is pointing in the same place with his arrow. And so this is a perfect illustration of how one can become an instrument in the hands of the Supreme Lord. And so actually Acharyas are explaining that this is Madhvacharya says that. This is Vaishnava Sayujya. Vaishnavas merging into the Supreme Lord. That you become one in purpose. Whatever Lord wants, you do only that and nothing else. Right? So in that sense, you don't care about your individuality anymore. The Lord becomes the most important individual in your life, and you only do what the Lord wants. At the same time, you remain a person. But you realize your oneness with the Supreme Lord. And so this is the state which is described here. And in this state, Nasha Chitina Prasanatma, first of all, one becomes Prasanna Atma, fully joyful, fully ecstatic, right? So Krishna consciousness is not static, it is ecstatic. Yes. For impersonalists, it must be really boring to be impersonalist, right? It's like static. Nothing's happening. Like one guy, they meditate on nothing. So, you have to not to be distracted by any material objects. So one impersonal meditation is meditate on the wall, right? Because there are like least distractions. So one impersonalist is meditating on the wall. 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, just sitting and staring at the wall. After 30 years, he gets up and says, with this wall, everything is clear. I figured out this wall and went away. You might be liberated by doing nothing, right? In Russia, they say that, like working people have nothing to lose except their chains, because they chained up. And they joke that if you have minimal reaction, right? And so, because impersonalism is trying to avoid pain, right? So they try to avoid activity. They try to stop all activities because they realize activity is producing pain after a while. And some of them achieve because they want it so badly. Krishna is giving them the opportunity to come to the stage of liberation. And they go into Brahman effulgence, and there, they feel some ecstasy. Because, material world is such a painful place. And so, if you feel a lot of pain, like, say, I'm pretty sure any of you have been sick with a lot of pain in your life. Anyone have this experience? Being sick with a lot of pain? And so, after you got over it, after the pain was over, how did you feel? Blissful, right? Relaxed, yes. Liberated. Partially liberated. So you feel happy, finally, there is no pain, my God. After such a long time, such a relief, right? So in the same way, these impersonalists, when they get liberated finally from material existence and they go into Brahman, it's all like very warm and cozy light, and they float in that light, and they feel ecstatic. And so they float in there for a day, relaxing, for a week, for a month. They start thinking, what's happening in Croydon? And as soon as they have
back to Godhead, back
Yes. Back to mommy. Back home, back to mommy. It seems like they've achieved some liberation, but at the end they just get nothing, because they just go back to the life again. So that's why it's not really recommended to stop at liberation, because you lose it after a while. And so this is what trouble, so that they would be free to serve him. And so that's why liberation is automatically achieved by the devotees. And devotees are fully joyful, being liberated, and they don't lament about anything, and they don't desire anything, meaning that they are not lamenting about themselves, because what's in there to lament about, because we're not these bodies, right? And body is just a bag of bones. And so liberated devotees, they don't care about it. Like Srila Prabhupada, when he came last time to London, and he was at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, and he was at the verge of leaving the body, so he was basically skin and bones. He couldn't walk himself. He had to be carried on palanquin. And he couldn't even look at the light. He had to wear dark glasses. And so he was very emaciated, and he was brought into his room, and then the devotees came for darshan. And devotees were shocked to see him in this condition. And they were very sad. And Prabhupada looked at them and smiled and said, "How are you all doing?" And they were thinking, "Oh my God, he's in such a difficult position, and he's asking us, how are we doing?" And one disciple said, "Srila Prabhupada, when we see you in this state, our hearts break, and we feel very sad." And Prabhupada said, "Very strange. For so many years, I was teaching you that we are not the bodies, but you are still thinking I'm this body. I think I have problems. I have no problems. It's a body, nothing but the body." So this is liberated state, right? That devotee is not identifying himself in the body, and Prabhupada showed that perfect example until his last breath, translating or dictating his Bhaktivedanta purports to the Bhagavatam. And funny enough, very jolly purports, right? Just for curiosity, give a read to the 13th chapter. I mean, number 13 somehow is connected to Srila Prabhupada in very mysterious ways, right? That he started his journey to America on August 13th, which was Friday the 13th. I mean, I'm not sure about this superstition, but he had 2 heart attacks on this ship and nearly died. So probably if he would calculate materially, he would not start his journey on Friday the 13th, but he didn't care, right? So pure devotee is not dependent on these things. And he left his body by dictating Bhaktivedanta purpose to the 10th canto, chapter 13 of Bhagavatam, and just for curiosity's sake, give it to those purports. And these I was like, it blew my mind. These are such jolly purports, such ecstatic purports, describing the nature of the spiritual world, loving nature, loving relationships of residents of Vrindavan, and mutual service and care, and you will never figure out that it's coming from the dying man. So, this is the example, best example, of course, Srila Prabhupada, of everything which his books are talking about. And there is no identification with the material body. And no desires. Because every desire becomes fulfilled in Krishna consciousness, right? We don't know what to desire. When I started worshipping Giriraj, I had so many desires. So I was asking Giriraj. Then he fulfilled all my desires. Now I am stuck. This is how it is in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Because material desires are limited. And it's not very hard to fulfill them. And then you don't know what to do. But Krishna tells you what to do. Now, engage in devotional service. I fulfilled all your desires. Now you fulfill all my desires. And unlike us, Krishna is unlimited. And his desires are also unlimited. Right? And his main desire is to engage us in his devotional service. And then equal disposition towards all living entities, sama sarveshu bhutishu, not seeing someone who is someone as better or worse, smarter, or someone is wise, someone is otherwise. So all these distinctions, they are applicable to the body, gross and subtle. But for devotee, every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and devotee is thinking, how can I reconnect? It's like broken link, right? And I have to. And it says that this is the position in which one can attain pure devotional service. So this is the verse which Srila Prabhupada quoted often. And, he's paraphrasing the Vrindavan Mahimamrita in here, in the purports also, by Bhakti Siddhanta or by Prabhanananda Saraswati. And then it says, Vishvapurnam Sukhayate, for devotee, the whole material world, which is a miserable place for materialistic people, Vishvapurnam Sukhayate, for him the whole world is filled with happiness. Because Krishna is everywhere, and opportunities to become engaged in his devotional service, if we are looking for them, are also everywhere. And so, as long as Krishna is there and devotional service is there, devotee is very happy. And so, even though he lives in the material world, but his life is as good as the life in the spiritual world. Yeah. So this is the result of devotional service, which is stressed throughout the entire Bhagavad Gita. The whole Bhagavad Gita is speaking about it. Of course, the next verse is making it even more clear why one requires liberation, but eternally. And it is Krishna who is Krishna is doing so much for me, and am I doing much for him? No, I'm just busy trying to entertain myself in this material. It's like children, right? Little children. Parents do so much for them, but they're busy enjoying. But then, after they grow up, they're supposed to realize, okay, parents did everything for me, so maybe I should also do something for them, right? As a reciprocation. So our eternal parent, eternal Father is the Supreme Lord. And it's a natural instinct that he does so much. He did already and continues doing everything for me. And so what am I doing for him? And therefore, the more we become Krishna conscious like this, the stronger our desire to please the Lord by our service manifests. So that's the main idea. Anyone has any questions on this subject? Because we'll be also continuing with our practices.
Much the first line, one who is transcendently situated, one realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful.
Yeah.
So this seems to be indicating that even in the Brahman there is that bliss. But we know from Prabhupada's other purports that he explains that there's eternity in Brahman, but not necessarily bliss. Is that a little bit contradictory? Or?
No, there is bliss. Even for impersonalists, they feel bliss.
Like you mentioned about less pain.
Yeah. In contrast with material world, they feel bliss. But then they get bored with it.
So it's not like eternal bliss.
Yeah. So it's like a foundation to the building of devotional service. But if you just build a foundation and you don't continue and you don't put a building on it, then after a while this foundation will crack and become useless. So if someone is only looking for liberation, it's like, just consider that you were in prison for many years and then you liberated, right? But once you're out of the prison, you're not doing anything. So it's like, what's the point? What's the use of getting out of the prison? At least in prison, it was kind of controlled, right? By the modes of nature. And so you're out of prison, and so it's actually been quite interesting phenomenon that many times criminals, they go out of prison and they cannot find it's like, because in prison they got used to certain what do you call it, routine